Journalists' rights in the United States are under question after an RT news team spent around 32 hours in jail following their coverage of a protest rally. Officers handcuffed the crew before marching them to a police van.
Right. Oh God, it's so tight. I can't feel my finger.
Because when they cut it off,
Just breathing, It's
Our
really
correspondent Helene Ford described her handling by police as brutal. Here's more of her first-hand experience of the arrest.
oh my God, that is pretty.
While we were filming, we were asked to step aside. We were asked to step onto the sidewalk, which we did. This is documented in the footage that we shot. We turned our backs, and all of a sudden we were being arrested. We were not told what we were being charged with. We were taken to the county jail. It took about 4 hours for us to be told what we were being charged with, and we were processed through the system, and we actually spent 32 hours in the county jail there in Georgia. Even though we were clearly credentialed press, we're accredited with the United States Congress, we presented our press credentials, and they still arrested us. We were charged just as all the other activists were. All of us were found guilty of every single charge brought against us. There was no distinction made between the press and between the the activists that were there and the bystanders, the innocent bystanders. So really, we felt as journalists that we didn't have protection of freedom of the press. We didn't have First Amendment rights. And it's interesting that this happened outside of the School of the Americas, where they're training soldiers and police to do these kind of actions against populations in Latin America, and much of the same repression was seen on the streets of the United States. The case isn't over yet. We did appear before a judge. In many ways, it was the most undemocratic, I would say, process. Sort of miscarriage of justice. I mean, a lot of us weren't even permitted to speak. We weren't even permitted to hear what the police officers were saying against us, or permitted to respond. It was sort of the judge chose to not only, press charges against us and decide, even though it was an arraignment, but also sentence us. And we're also facing state charges for unlawful assembly, which as journalists, we obviously are not part of an unlawful assembly where they're covering it and under our First Amendment rights.
Well, the American Constitution's First Amendment guarantees free speech, but human rights activist David Lindorf says the U.S. is now tightening control of the media, sometimes breaching even the basic rights of journalists.
There's a more aggressive attitude towards interfering with the right of the free press, as your reporters found out down in Georgia. In the U.S., we're moving slowly toward, glacially, maybe sometimes faster, towards more of a police state, where the police run kind of rampant and nobody controls them. They're able to charge your journalists as demonstrators, which is ludicrous. That will intimidate you, presumably, from sending them to other events because you don't want to keep paying these fines and things. The only way to deal with this is to fight them in the court. I think you're going to see more and more of it. The attitude that the police have is that they can do whatever they want, and that the First Amendment is really at their at their whim, not something that we're guaranteed. You're the only ones who are showing the guts to go and cover these things. And now when you get confronted with it, you should defend yourselves and fight the police on it.
Well, the American Constitution's First Amendment guarantees free speech. But human rights activist David Swansong says the RT arrests highlight how increasing numbers of journalists are unable to exercise that right.
We have an array of tactics used by the U.S. government and military. We have media outlets bombed in the course of our wars. We have journalists shot at. We have Pentagon spokespeople secretly paid to say what they supposedly think on television. We have fake news reports generated by the government, and we have a campaign of intimidation that is very, very successful. And it's, there are two disgraceful things that happened here. One, an arrest of journalists and activists, and two, most U.S. media outlets not risking arrest, complying with the desires of those in power, or successfully intimidated.